Hey everyone, uh, grab your drink, settle in, and listen because this one came through with an energy I wasn't entirely prepared for, and I think you're going to feel exactly why the moment we get into it. There is a particular moment that happens in the arc of certain dynamics, a moment so quiet on the surface that most people miss it entirely, where the entire power structure of a relationship, a situation, a connection that has been tilting in the wrong direction for far too long, simply and completely reverses, not with an argument, not with a confrontation, not with any of the dramatic machinery we tend to associate with things shifting. It reverses with something far more unsettling to the person on the receiving end of it. It reverses with your absence, your silence, your decision, quiet, final, and devastating in its calmness, to simply stop performing for an audience that never deserved a front row seat. And something, somewhere in the orbit of your life, has felt that reversal. Maybe recently, maybe in a way that is still unfolding, but felt it unmistakably in the particular way that only people who took something for granted feel the moment it is no longer available to be taken. Let me paint this for you, because I think the image matters here. Picture a chessboard not in the middle of a game, but in the moment just after a move has been made that the other player didn't see coming. The board looks almost the same as it did a moment ago. The pieces are familiar. The positions haven't changed dramatically. And yet, everything, every subsequent possibility, every future move, every calculation the other player had been building their strategy around has been fundamentally, irreversibly altered because one piece moved in a direction they weren't prepared for. Because the board revealed itself to be more complex than they had been treating it, because they underestimated, with a confidence that now looks embarrassingly misplaced, the intelligence of the player sitting across from them. You are that player, and you just made a move they didn't see coming. This reflection invites you to consider what was the specific moment, the turning point, the quiet internal click of something shifting into place when you finally understood that the energy you had been extending so generously was not being received with the respect it deserved. Because that moment, whenever it arrived, however it arrived, whether it came as a sudden clarity or as the slow accumulation of 1,000 small disappointments finally reaching a tipping point, that moment was not a loss. It felt like one, perhaps, the loss of an illusion has a specific grief attached to it, sharp and real, and not to be dismissed simply because what was lost was never entirely solid to begin with. But beneath the grief, something else was happening. Something was straightening. Something that had been bending itself into uncomfortable shapes to accommodate a dynamic that never deserved that accommodation was finally quietly standing up. And here is where it gets interesting. Here is where the story takes the turn that the other person absolutely did not anticipate. Because people who play games with others, who test, who push, who create instability as a means of maintaining control, who mistake someone's patience for weakness and someone's kindness for an inexhaustible resource. Those people operate on a very specific assumption. They assume that the person they are playing with will continue to play, that the rules they have established, the dynamic they have carefully cultivated, the particular arrangement of pursuit and distance and hot and cold that has kept the other person off balance, will simply continue to function the way it always has, because it always has, until now. This reflection invites you to consider what specifically changed inside you, not around you, not in the behavior of the other person, but inside the private landscape of your own understanding that made continuing to participate in that dynamic simply no longer possible. Because the shift that makes someone realize you are not one to play with doesn't come from a decision made in anger. Anger, however justified, is still a form of engagement. It still keeps you in the arena, still signals that the game has the power to affect you, still offers the other person something to work with. The shift that truly changes the dynamic is colder than anger and more powerful than any confrontation. It is the moment a person simply stops explaining themselves, stops adjusting their behavior to manage someone else's reactions, stops making themselves easier to be around for someone who never made the corresponding effort, stops, in short, being available for a game they never agreed to play in the first place. That stopping is not cruelty. It is not punishment, though it may be experienced as such by the person who has suddenly lost access to something they had been treating as a given. It is simply the most honest expression of a boundary that should have existed long before it did. Some of you watching this have spent an extraordinary amount of energy trying to be legible to someone who was never genuinely trying to read you. Choosing your words carefully, moderating your tone, adjusting your approach, softening your edges, performing a kind of emotional labor that was never reciprocated and never acknowledged, because the person it was performed for was too busy managing their own agenda to notice the effort it required. And somewhere in that exhausting, thankless performance, you lost a thread of yourself, a thread of the direct, unmediated, fully inhabited version of you that existed before the dynamic began asking you to be smaller. That thread is finding its way back to you now. Slowly, perhaps, with some uncertainty about how to hold it again after so long without it. But back, nonetheless, returning to its rightful place in the fabric of who you actually are. This reflection invites you to consider what specific quality of yourself, a directness, a confidence, a willingness to walk away from what doesn't serve you did you set aside to accommodate this dynamic? And what does it feel like to sense that quality returning? Now they're coming back. Or the energy of a return is present, circling, looking for an opening. And I want to talk about this carefully because this is the moment where many people, having done the extraordinary work of reclaiming themselves, inadvertently undo it, not through weakness, but through a very specific and very human vulnerability. The vulnerability of wanting the validation of the return more than they want the integrity of the boundary. Here is what coming back correctly actually looks like from the outside when it is genuine. It looks like accountability without performance, a real reckoning with the impact of previous behavior offered not as a strategy to regain access, but as an honest acknowledgement of what was done and what it cost. It looks like changed behavior, not changed words, actions that are consistent over time, that don't require you to adjust your expectations downward to accommodate them, that match the level of respect you were always owed. It looks like someone who has genuinely sat in the discomfort of losing access to you and emerged from that discomfort with something learned, something integrated, something real. And it looks like something else too, something subtler, and perhaps most important of all. It looks like someone who has stopped treating you as a resource and started treating you as a person, who approaches the connection with the specific quality of attention that genuine respect produces: attentive, present, aware that what they had access to was not a given but a gift, and that the gift, having been carelessly handled, is now being offered back with a care that was conspicuously absent before. This reflection invites you to consider: how will you distinguish in the texture of whatever return presents itself between genuine change and the performance of change designed to restore access without requiring the actual internal work that real change demands? Because this is the real test, not the return itself. The return is easy for someone practiced in the particular art of reentry. The test is what you do with the return. Whether you allow the relief of being sought to override the wisdom of what you've learned, whether the hunger for the good parts, the parts that were real, the parts that made the dynamic worth engaging with in the first place, leads you back into proximity with the parts that were not, whether you extend the grace of a second chance before the first chance has been genuinely accounted for. Some of you have a very specific and very beautiful quality and almost architectural capacity for compassion that makes you genuinely, naturally inclined to believe in people's ability to change, to meet growth with grace, to hold space for the best version of someone, even when their behavior has been offering you their worst. That quality is not a flaw. It is one of the most extraordinary things about you. But it has a shadow side, a tendency to extend the benefit of the doubt past the point where the doubt has been earned, to offer a generosity that exceeds what the evidence actually supports, to let the heart overrule the gut in moments when the gut has been the more reliable narrator. Your gut has been the more reliable narrator. It has been, in this situation, consistently and quietly and without drama, telling you something accurate. The question is whether you are ready to let that accuracy be enough to let what you know, rather than what you hope, be the foundation on which any future interaction is built. This reflection invites you to consider: what would it look like to honor both your compassion and your discernment simultaneously, to remain open to the possibility of genuine change while holding firm to the standard of evidence required before that possibility becomes a decision? The power is yours. It always has been. Not the power to control whether they come back, or how, or with what intention, but the power to decide from the solid ground of someone who knows their own worth, who has done the work of reclaiming themselves, who has felt what it costs to give too much to the wrong dynamic, exactly what coming back correctly is going to require. And to hold that standard, not as punishment, not as a wall, but as the simple, dignified expression of a person who finally fully understands what they deserve. Coming back correct. They realize you're not one to play with, not eventually already, in the specific quality of their attention now that your absence has replaced your availability, in the recalibration happening on their end of whatever this is, in the dawning and uncomfortable recognition that what they had was not replaceable, not replicable, not something they will simply find again somewhere else with someone more willing to accept less, Trust yourself with this. The version of you that stood up, stepped back, and refused to keep performing for an audience that wasn't paying the right kind of attention, that version was not difficult. That version was finally exactly precisely enough. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments because this community holds some of the most perceptive people I've ever encountered. What was the specific moment, the one that finally made something click when you realized that the energy you were giving was not being matched? And what did you do with that realization? And when someone comes back after showing you who they were, how do you personally decide whether the return deserves a yes or a not this time? Drop it below. I read every single one, and I mean that without reservation. See you in the next one. And listen. The moment they realized you weren't one to play with was the moment you already knew it yourself. Everything since then has just been confirmation. Take care.